Welcome to Y Nada Más, a Real Madrid podcast.
All right, what is going on, everybody, and welcome once again to Y Nada Más, a Real Madrid podcast. I am your host, Eric Rivera, and it is good to be back once again for another show. It's actually been it's been 4 games have occurred since the last podcast that I had. Sometimes life gets in the way. I try to stay on top of this thing as much as possible and try to keep you guys up to date with the games. But, there's a lot of games that are going on, obviously Champions League, and sometimes during the week, I've said it a couple times during the week, it's a little bit harder for me to get on top of the onto the podcast and do what I need to do. And then, of course, my son has been practicing. He's been doing his football season, and it's actually pretty cool. He's 6 years old. He's starting to get some ball control. At the beginning, it's very just, them running around and playing around or whatnot. But, now and just kicking the ball, really nobody has any rules. Like none of them are figuring it out yet. Just real basic stuff. But now he's starting to pick it up. He's 6 now, so now he's starting, a little bit better control with his feet. He's starting to listen more to the coaches. I try to stay in the back and and just let the coaches do their thing. I mean, I always hated when parents got involved. When I was coaching kickboxing and coaching, boxing, parents always feel like they know stuff, and that they have all the knowledge in the world. But sometimes they don't. And, I like to let the coach do their work. I mean, I shout and do things to, tell them to like motivate them, but I like to let the coach do their work. And I think it's important. And he's doing, like ball rolls and step overs, not like crazy Ronaldinho-esque kind of thing, but he's doing really well, and kind of happy about that. So, like I said, it's been 4 games since the last podcast, and those have been the games against Osasuna, against Elche, against Shakhtar, and against Rayo Vallecano. So before I get into, what I wanted to discuss, you can remember, guys, you can always catch the podcast. Right now, I'm recording here. You can catch it on YouTube. You can see the YouTube video version of the podcast. So if you're listening right now, there is a video version of the podcast that you can check out on YouTube, and that is at Y Nada Más Podcast on YouTube. So check it out there. Hey, guys, do me a big favor. If you are listening to the podcast, even if you don't go on YouTube a lot, what I would like you to do is, if you can, just drop me a subscribe, hit the subscribe button. It just helps me get more subscribers, but at the same time, what I'm trying to do is, get the vanity URL so I don't have to use like the channel number or whatever it is, and I can actually have the Y Nada Más podcast vanity URL. So if you help me, guys, get the subscribers up there, that would really help me in getting more visibility onto the show. But of course, help me get that little thing, which is a big stepping stone, I think, to get your channel underway. So if you guys can help me out with that. If not, if you are just listening, of course, on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, on Stitcher, wherever you find your podcast, Spotify. If you are on Apple Podcasts, please make sure that you drop a comment and that you leave a rating, because that helps us rise up in the ranks and, get more visibility within a lot of sports podcasts out there. I think when it comes to Real Madrid, there are only I think a handful of podcasts that are English speaking for Real Madrid. Obviously, Managing Madrid is a big one. I don't know if Managing Madrid is only. I'm gonna talk to those dudes. I think they're coming to Miami in January. So I'm gonna see if I hook up with them and pick their brains a little bit. But they're doing a great job always. I love those guys from Managing Madrid. So I don't know if they're on Pod. I don't know if they're off Patreon though. I think they're just doing like Patreon stuff. So, but on Apple Podcasts, I mean, it's really us and then a couple of other people that are doing those. So if you can, please leave a comment and help us rise up in the ranks there, because there's tons of different football podcasts, but not many for Real Madrid. So that, would get more visibility on, of course, which should be, the highest ranking, podcasts should all be about Real Madrid, of course, the best team in the world. So besides that, you can also check us out. If you see the little ticker here on the screen, you can check us out at YNM Podcast. That's on Instagram, at Inadamas Podcast. That's on Facebook, and at Inadamas Podcast on Twitter, which is where I'm most active. If you guys don't see me, if I haven't dropped a podcast or anything like that, you can probably still always see me, either retweeting or typing some stuff here and there as games go on during the season, right there on Twitter, which is where I'm most active. Besides that, a lot of stuff has been going on, of course. A lot of things have been talked about. And, since about the 2 weeks that I've been gone or haven't done a podcast, I've essentially been watching all the games. I've been taking notes. I've been, formulating my opinions. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about, I think. And mostly it goes back to this old, I think, it's kind of strange. It's damned if you do and damned if you don't. For Ancelotti, for whether it was Ancelotti, whether it was Zidane, whether it's whatever player it is. One day Benzema is the greatest in the world. One day he sucks. Well, for some Madridistas, I'm not saying that's all of you guys. So some days Benzema is the greatest. Some days he sucks. Some days Casemiro, is a complete wall, and then for other days, we should be kicking him off the team. Then other days, why aren't we playing Hazard? He's way better than Asensio. He's better than Lucas Vázquez, even though he hasn't really shown us that much as of yet. And there is some news today, as when I'm recording this, that came out on El Chiringuito. How much can we believe of that? We'll have to see. But things aren't looking too good there for Eden Hazard, I think, for Real Madrid. It doesn't seem like Ancelotti and team are too happy with him, apparently. But I'll get into that a little bit later when I have a couple more comments about other things going around the league. Of course, like things like, Barca's falling apart. Can Xavi save it now that he has arrived? My vote is on no, and I'll get into a little bit more details of that. Why, talking about, of course, different things that are going on with Atletico Madrid, Real Sociedad, of course, Real Madrid, and these whole Zidane. And the other thing is like these whole Zidane versus Ancelotti conversations that are going on. I think Twitter it's a great place. I've met a lot of you really cool. I think have I would say pretty intelligent discussions or comments with a couple of people on Twitter, but then it's really a handful of people, and then all of a sudden it's like a deluge or deluge, I don't know how you would say it, but a deluge of just like idiotic comments and spamming, and there's an overabundance of people using buzzwords and phrases that I think they're either 10 years old or they act like they're 10 years old, but it's like, this club is dusted, in the mud, like all this like really just stupid Twitter talk. So, and then you guys are like super obsessed with who somebody's representing in their avatar or whatever, or in their AV or whatever you guys call it, the profile pic essentially. Some people don't want to show their face and they have all these opinions. And then you have guys like me that, I do show my face and, I have my opinions. My profile pic is essentially a logo of the podcast. But, I think I've put myself out there enough to get hatred from other people. I want to do, one of those Twitter spaces where people can chime in, and we'll see, if anybody's going to have some shit to talk. I can talk some shit with the best of them too. So we'll see what happens with that in that regard, but I'm not going to waste my time arguing with people over whether you're part of Zidane FC or Ancelotti FC, or whether there's some sort of agenda against this guy or that guy, or you're pissed off because they don't play your favorite player for Real Madrid, or you're hating on every single player. I don't know. There's just a lot of weird conversations there that kind of get on my nerves, and then they take away from, I think, the real discussions that should be had. Where everyone's like talking in little tidbits of information, while I think a lot of other Madridistas really do want to have discussion about what's going on. Sometimes you're going to have a point of view that might not be shared by everybody else. Sometimes you're going to have a point of view that may be shared by everybody else. But that's why I'm here. I'm just putting my point of view out there. If you agree, cool. Listen to the podcast, and if you don't agree, well, whatever. But shout out to all you guys that have been listening. Shout out to a lot of you guys, retweeting, liking some of the comments. Following me and saying that you do enjoy the podcast. So that's awesome. That's awesome for us. That, we're putting in the work. Essentially, making the graphics, recording the show, getting the music ready, all those little things that we try to do to produce a show that we feel is entertaining, I guess. I try not to go too much into stats. I leave that to the guys at Managing Madrid who are like awesome at that. I read all their stuff. I'm not a huge I wouldn't say proponent. I'm not a huge follower of the stats. I don't consider myself a statistician per se. I'm not huge on you would call it the eye test or whatever, but I analyze what I analyze based on what I can see of the game. When sometimes I can see it, because sometimes I'm sitting. I think the last game, it was versus Shakhtar, I could catch little glimpses of it, but I had a conference call I had to be on, so I'm sitting there kind of not trying to make sure that no one is looking. The fact that I have the football game on one of my screens while I'm at work. But, it's pretty lenient as long as I'm not staring at it and watching every play. So I have to be mindful of that. But, and some of the things I catch, what I try to do is take, mental notes. And then what I'm trying to do now is write down sort of a show prep every single time, I go in. So with some statistics and some things that stood out so I don't forget when I want to talk to you guys. So the games that have passed since then, there was a lot of things that were said. Obviously, one of the games that passed was Real Madrid versus Osasuna, a 0-0 game, 0-0 draw or 0-0 draw, however you want to say it. And honestly, I think the team got a lot of flack from this game because, why didn't we try this? Why don't we try that? We still can't play against teams that play this whole low block, parking the bus kind of thing. We can't, deal with teams like that. And the thing is, sometimes you're going to have to deal with those teams. You're going to lose points. Obviously, we don't want to lose points against teams, especially like at El Bernabeu. We don't want to lose points against teams, like Osasuna that we could, potentially, yes, we could beat them on paper. But they've been very, very tight defensively. They've been a pretty strong team in La Liga. I think every team is very competitive this season, with the exception of a few. I think, like Getafe has been terrible. There's a couple of other teams there at the bottom of the list that are not playing well whatsoever. Levante is actually surprisingly at the bottom there. So the La Liga this season is a lot more competitive than people want to give it credit for. Now, is it obviously there's a lot of talk about La Liga's quality falling because, of course, the loss of a lot of really, really high potential potential big name players such as guys like, of course, Messi, Sergio Ramos, Cristiano Ronaldo a couple seasons ago. The fact that Hazard came and he's been a dud, unfortunately. So there's a lot of that, and hopefully we can restore some luster to the league. But the good thing is it is no longer that two-horse race that for so long it was. Obviously, then we got a third horse that came in there, which was Atletico Madrid. And now it seems like with the exit of some of these players and the crisis of Barcelona and, I would say the austerity measures that Ancelotti put in place for expenditures and not buying too many players and things like that, and kind of trying to restructure this team, we are seeing a very, very competitive league. Now, I feel that, however, that Real Madrid is in a position to win this league. Of course, it remains to be seen how much Real Sociedad can keep up this play that they're having and this form that they're in. I was listening to El Chiringuito, and they were mentioning that at this time last season, Real Sociedad was in first place, was the leader of La Liga. And then we all know that they did not end up being the winners of La Liga, and they dropped. And essentially, Real Madrid came second, and Sevilla was third. Was it Barcelona was third or Sevilla was third? I don't even remember. But I know we were 1 and 2 with Atletico Madrid. So those guys dropped out of the race later on. So will they be able to sustain this play that they're having right now? They also have injuries on the team. They're also running into situations like that. So we'll have to see how that's going to play out. But I do feel like this is a big, big chance for Real Madrid to take the league title. Obviously, it's still November. It's still very early. And things need to change a little bit with Real Madrid. There are things that concern me. But I don't think it is as bad as a lot of people, Madridistas, like to paint it every single time. And one of the things that came out, like one of those narratives that jumped out to me was, of course, how everybody was so angry because of this Real Madrid versus Osasuna draw. You know, for me, Real Madrid played well against a team that had very little interest in attacking whatsoever. You know, I don't think Ancelotti's decisions were necessarily that bad, except for not, you know, trying to bring on an extra, let's say an extra striker in the second half, maybe trying, you know, a Jovic, which is another, you know, conversation, of course, or even a Mariano to come on and try and score in that game, you know, maybe basically adding another striker. If we weren't able to do it at that point, why don't we try and go to get the 3 points? But of course, I think a lot of times Ancelotti, what has been proved, what I think is starting to be proven by Ancelotti's style is that he is not a risk taker. He is not a go for broke kind of guy at this point, we see. Not a guy that is going to throw everything towards winning the game in the last few minutes, which is where I think is a little bit of a divergence, I would say, from his mentality and Zidane's mentality, you know, during the last season and when he was coach with Real Madrid. I think, you know, this whole thing that they talked about, La Flor de Zidane, where Zidane was able to squeak out a win for Real Madrid in the final minutes of the game, always came down to the attitude that the players seem to have under Zidane. Now, does that mean that they don't have this attitude under Ancelotti? I don't know. I don't know if Ancelotti can motivate the players the same way Zidane does and get that fire under them, or if he's a lot more pragmatic, if he's a lot more, definitely a lot more tactical. So there are things I want to get into that in a little bit more towards the end of the podcast, talking about where I feel like there are some sort of differences there in their coaching styles, but neither one is bad. Neither one is completely bad nor completely good or better than the other. I think they both have their strengths and their weaknesses. So there's no reason for Madridistas to be pitting, you know, two coaches that were essentially legendary for Real Madrid. You know, obviously Ancelotti for getting La Décima, and then Zidane, it doesn't even need to be said, of course, what he brought to Real Madrid. So, but I don't think they were, you know, it's something to argue about, essentially. You know, if there's a problem with people that didn't like the way Zidane left, and there is a narrative, I feel like, in the Spanish media, especially by Chiringuito and Pedredol, against Zidane. And that's probably I always feel like that kind of stuff is because he probably didn't give them any exclusives or sit down with them or talk to them the way they wanted to talk to them. So they build up a sort of animosity towards the coach because he's not as open as other coaches are. You know, so it's the same thing we see. I mean, as much as I don't like Luis Enrique, I think it's the same thing that happens with Luis Enrique. He's not very cordial with the press. He's not an open book with the press. He's very standoffish with them. So there's a whole, you know, feeling of, you know, this guy's not our guy. But, you know, the media can be, unfortunately, what we've seen in the last few years is journalism has gone on from being a statement of fact or trying to get the facts and put the facts out there to also a place sort of like a social media outlet where really it's people, you know, all these guys, all these shows, these pundits, everybody is trying to get clout. Everybody is trying to be known as the guy to get your information from, the guy with the exclusivas, the guy with the exclusives. So you get a lot of this, I would say, you know, it's kind of pseudo journalism mixed with, of course, with entertainment. So trying to, you know, make all these things, you know, bells and whistles and smoke and mirrors and make everything seem like it's bigger than it is, or, you know, or shut down, you know, comments or negativity about certain things. I feel like we see that with, Real Madrid versus Barcelona. I mean, the celebration of Xavi coming to Barcelona, you would think, these guys are in first place, the way they were celebrating and the way the media is calling it like a new era for Barcelona. Why is that being celebrated essentially, whereas, Real Madrid, we don't, the idea is, you celebrate trophies, you celebrate achievements, you don't celebrate the fact that you're in ninth place in the league. So it just seems strange to me. And there's that narrative always that, it's us versus them, Catalunya versus Madrid, and this whole, Barcelona versus Real Madrid, spectacle that happens. It's annoying, but it happens, and it's part of being a La Liga fan. As you get more into it, it's always going to be there, that sort of back and forth between these two clubs, both politically and socioeconomically or whatever. They're going to talk up all this stuff that I think doesn't even have to do with sport. And there is an actual hatred sometimes between certain elements of the teams. But anyway, going on to Real Madrid versus Osasuna, as I said, it was a team that was playing a very little attacking football. They were just sitting back. Honestly, watching the game, I felt like Real Madrid, it wasn't like they were sitting back. They were doing everything possible to try and score. They had 17 shots in total, 3 on target, 14 chances were created, 75% possession. I mean, look at that, 90% pass accuracy. I think this is where it is. Like, if you look at the expected goals, the number was 0.69. So that means they weren't getting, if that number means that essentially, they weren't getting, even though they had 17 shots on target, 17 shots, only 30 were on target. They were getting chances to create, but they were not able to get those shots that would essentially put you on the scorecard. They weren't getting those clean shots. I mean, like I said, they were at 0.69 essentially means that they were getting a lot of low quality shots in order to get that number by the end of the game. So they were getting a lot of low quality shots that probably were not going to go in, or were going to be blocked, or were going to be stopped by the goalkeeper. So not a lot of good stuff available to Real Madrid there, and it was because it was a team that was sitting back. It was very difficult for them to break down. Yes, this is a lower tier team that Real Madrid sometimes on paper should be beating, but it is not. Osasuna hasn't been as bad this season, or as how would I say, they haven't been as I would say terrible. I mean, they're not terrible, but they weren't as low in the table as they were last season. They've actually been a pretty organized team, and I think that's the only reason you can have anything to say bad about that game, except was possibly we could have tried to do something else and bring on, some more attacking players. But like I said, Ancelotti's style, it seems like he's not the go for broke type of guy. He is kind of the guy that's more pragmatic, more let's try to take game by game. We'll lose. Obviously, he doesn't want to risk it. Possibly opening up, going for broke, and trying to score the goal. Will it cost us in the end by getting maybe a fluke or a quick counterattack, which is what a lot of these teams did to us last season? We were so concerned about trying to score a goal, throwing everything, toda la carne al asador, as they would say, basically throwing the kitchen sink. And then, of course, you get caught on a counter and you end up losing 3 points when you could have secured at least one. So I think Ancelotti plays a lot safer than some Madridistas would like, but I definitely don't think, for me, that the Osasuna draw was that bad, at least in this part of the season. It's better to gain a point than it is to drop all 3 points. Obviously, it's better to win, but in a team like that was sitting back, they were not playing a football that was going to let us get chances. And sometimes you end up with these games. Sometimes you lose points. And I think a lot of times Madridistas just don't understand that, games are going to be had where you are going to either have to grind out a win, which is what we've been doing a lot as of late, or you are going to have to, I would say, you're going to end up with a draw, as much as you wouldn't like to happen, but it happens. So the second game was obviously that since I've been gone, was Elche versus Real Madrid, a 2-1 Real Madrid game. Obviously, Vinicius brace showing up big time. Casemiro once again was not in his best form, and that's another conversation. His errant pass to Toni Kroos ends up getting picked off by Pere Mila, and Pere Mila gets one back for Elche. The game ends up becoming, and this is what has happened with Real Madrid as is late, is that we cannot get ahead, score goals, and try to, I guess, the team can't leave Madridistas with a sense of calm or a sense of like, we've got this game, we've got it under control. There's always something that we do, a lot of times an error in the defense, a momentary lapse in the entire team falling asleep for a second, or getting what I feel is complacent with maybe they're 1 up, that they're 2 up, and then they let the team get back into the game, score 1, and essentially it's game on from that team. And that team starts firing forward, and we just try to sit back and wait for the storm to pass. And that's not a way to play a game, essentially. Maybe you can survive against an Elche. You can survive against a Shakhtar. You can survive against a Rayo Vallecano with a 2-1 scoreline. But I think a lot of Madridistas, when we're playing bigger teams, if we are playing teams like, in this case, in the La Liga, Real Sociedad, Sevilla, Atlético Madrid, we would like to have some cushion so that we can at least, I would say, not have to use an oxygen mask or, a defibrillator in order to get through the game at the end of towards the end of the game in the last few minutes of the second half. But how would I say, a lot of people talked about Mariano, his game against Elche. It was a surprise to have Mariano instead of Jovic. Of course, that's is Ancelotti sending a message to Jovic? I think at this point, absolutely. Of course, Mariano played well. And one thing that I think a lot of people do like about him is that he does always come out and play hard. He does always come out and really try to work for every single ball and really try to chase down the game as much as he can. But the problem with it is, and I don't like to criticize, I guess, or say, because I feel like sometimes you say things like that and it's like, yeah, well, what could you have done? You're not a professional player. So, but the point is, I feel like Mariano comes in and his work rate doesn't match his skill set. So sure, you can work really hard and chase the ball and try to get tackles and try to score and everything, but it becomes highly erratic and sloppy. Like he's essentially going for things and he's making terrible decisions. Obviously, he didn't make a terrible decision, to set up Vinicius with that back heel pass to get the goal, but which was the first goal of the game. But of course, the rest of the game, he was trying to do different things, but he did, there was a moment where he was on a breakaway. Hazard was coming behind him, wide open, and he decides to go for the shot, and it goes completely wide. And it was just a terrible decision where we could have gone up and secured, like I said, that cushion in order to that 2-goal cushion once again in order to finish off the team and finish off the game. It would have been an easy goal, or at least an easier goal for an easier chance for Hazard. That's right there. Even though he had a great game, I remember watching it and thinking that one moment there summed up to me why he isn't chosen more often and why we keep playing Benzema and there's nobody to back him up. I don't understand why Jovic isn't played. I don't know what it is. Obviously, I think coaches see more than we do when these guys are training. I think it's the same thing that can be said of guys like Hazard. It's the same thing that could be said of I don't know, maybe guys like Miguel, maybe guys like Antonio Blanco, like why are they not getting chances? Are they not getting shots to play on the team? But we got to remember that Ancelotti was never very, during Ancelotti's tenure when we played the Decima, he wasn't a very big guy on rotating players, and he was definitely not a guy that invested a lot, I think, of time or gave a lot of thought to the youth players on our team. Which doesn't bode well, I think. Of course, that's kind of a negative in that regard, because I think Zidane was kind of the same way. He was forced to try to bring up some of these youth players and forced to play his hand and try and make these risks because of the injury situation and the COVID situation during last season. But Ancelotti, in this case, who has most of his starting 11 pretty healthy, doesn't seem to be as interested in trying these players that we have on the bench that could bring in something different. Obviously, is Miguel going to replace a Mendy? Probably not. But, I think it would be interesting to give them at least a run out. Antonio Blanco, we haven't, he played a couple really good games with Real Madrid, and I would say he should be given some time. He is I think for me, he's another player that looks really promising, and I think should be given a chance to play more minutes, especially with Casemiro not performing as well as we would like. So the next game that came up was then, the Champions League game, Real Madrid versus Shakhtar, 2-1. And all I can say is I watched the game. I caught the highlights later. I didn't watch the whole game, but I watched the whole game when I was at my office. But technically, I wasn't watching the whole game because it was kind of like I had to veer over and look at things and do things while I was watching it. So then I caught the highlights. And overall, I remember the feeling that I got from watching that game, and I don't know if any of you would agree with me, is that it was a lazy game from Real Madrid. After they scored the 1,000th goal of the season, of the Champions League, essentially becoming, the team with the most goals in the Champions League, which was, of course, a Vinicius and Benzema link up. As Vinicius was able to pick up a ball that was basically a heavy touch out of the back in defense. So it was a defensive mistake by Shakhtar. He's able to pick up the ball and pass it to Benzema for essentially an open net shot. And that was how that first goal was made. But after that, it seemed to me that Real Madrid completely started falling apart. And, it was just a game where they fell asleep completely. The team seemed tired. I don't know if they lacked attitude, but after they scored that first goal, it was pretty much, I think, for large portions of the game, it was more of a dominance by Shakhtar Donetsk than it was by Real Madrid. And we're talking about a game that was being played in Real Madrid, in El Bernabeu. So you would think they would try to do a little bit better in front of their home crowd, essentially after they thrashed Shakhtar 5-0 in Kiev. So it to me, it bothers me a little bit that they had that kind of attitude or that kind of complacency in playing the game when they're in front of their home fans, and and they just kind of take the foot off the gas pedal and just kind of let Shakhtar do whatever it wants. If it wasn't for a genius, essentially I think that goal that was scored by Vinicius, by Benzema with another great assist, a great play by Vinicius, that goal essentially, that was scored by Benzema. To me, it came in a moment where the team, it was kind of against the run of play. It was a moment that the team was not dominating. Real Madrid was not dominating, and they get that second goal, which gives them a cushion. Real Madrid, of course, Shakhtar had already scored a goal, was able to score a goal, and once again puts us in another 2-1 situation where we are hoping and praying throughout the end of the second half that we don't, of course, that we don't get another, that we don't concede and lose points in this game. That was important at this time. They played it like if they had already qualified for the round of 16. And that was what, to me, left a bad taste in my mouth. And I think is what continues to make a lot of Madridistas, I think, especially the more reactionary, and I think rightfully so, be a little bit worried about, hey, where is this team right now? Why they're winning games. I wouldn't say comfortably, but it wouldn't be the skin of their teeth either. It's not like we had to grind them out completely, but I mean, it's kind of like they were games that we could comfortably win and kind of comfortably see out the 2-1 victory, but you're leaving it up to chance still. So it's nerve-wracking for everybody else, and it shouldn't really be, that situation. 13 shots on goal. 13 shots total. Shakhtar actually had the same amount of shots, 3 on target for Real Madrid, 13 chances created, 54% possession. So it was pretty close in possession there for both teams. 92% accuracy in passing, which a lot of it is mostly Toni Kroos, and Modric keeping those numbers, and an expected goal of 2.01. So really, we did a good job in that game of putting away the chances that we were allowed, and essentially came away with an expected goal number that is very close, is exactly pretty much what we scored. So we win that game 2-1. The next game, of course, is Real Madrid versus Rayo Vallecano, which is the game that just happened this weekend. And this is another chance. That's the third 2-1 game in a row. In games that we were seemingly in control of and that we lose control of in the second half of the game. So this has become somewhat of a trend. And not only, I would say, we lose control not only in the second half, it seems we lose control when we're up on the score line and we just kind of sit back. And I think I've seen a lot of people that have mentioned this on Twitter, the sitting back, the taking the foot off the gas pedal, the relaxing a little bit. I don't know if it's, that's where I wonder where this is coming from, where this feeling is coming from, because I don't remember seeing this last season under Zidane. So that is where I feel like there is that, difference in fight between the coaching styles of both guys. And once again, like I said, maybe a lot more pragmatic from Ancelotti, not going out there and risking. Some people are saying, he's a bit of a coward. I wouldn't go and say that term, use that term. It's essentially playing safe is not the same as cowardice. Securing what he knows he can secure, or not trying to go out of his way too much to potentially risk getting losing points. So like I said, he's very, very, I would say, staunch in his style and in trying to make sure, we got up on goals. Now let's just kind of sit back, defend. And the thing that's crazy is to do that when our defensive prowess as of late isn't exactly exemplary, why are we doing that when we have, the defense hasn't always been as solid as we would like, although Carvajal and Mendy are back, which is great. Alaba is having some pretty good games. Eder Militao is starting to grow back into his position, similar to what we saw last season. Thibaut Courtois, of course, is being huge and saving our asses, but does it, I feel bad for Thibaut Courtois. Why does it always have to be like every single game he has to come up with some massive save or a multitude of massive saves in order to get us, over the finish line? Why does he have to do that? Why is our defense not, of course he's the last line of defense, but I think we could do a better job in it not always being where Thibaut Courtois has to do like a crazy standout save to save our asses. And that seems like it happens way too much right now with Real Madrid. So against Vallecano, same thing. Real Madrid dominate the first half. A beautiful goal by Toni Kroos. He was very good during this game. Another goal by Benzema in this game. And then, of course, once again, we sit back. We let the team get back into it. Falcao comes on for like 12 minutes of the game, scores a header, gets past Alaba. And, he beats Alaba at the back post, scores the header. And, now we're once again with our backs against the wall. Had Falcao been on the pitch longer than he was, after scoring that first goal, could we have possibly conceded another? Because he is doing really well right now and is playing very well and is definitely helping Rayo score goals. Listen, we had 15 shots, 14 chances were created, and I think the one thing that I remember was that the 15 shots were the same amount. We had essentially had, I think, the same amount of shots and I believe the same amount of shots on target as Rayo. So we were letting them in the game quite a bit. We were letting them, play with us quite a bit. And there was, of course, Toni Kroos came up huge at the end of the game with a goal line clearance in the dying minutes of the game that essentially saved us from losing those points once again in El Bernabeu, once again in front of our own fans, playing a game that at the end of the day, people were whistling at the players because it was not, once again, a convincing game. After the goal that Toni Kroos scored, and then the ability that Vinicius, Vinicius, of course, and Benzema are playing extremely well. But, after the goals that were scored, essentially letting them back in the game, people are happy after that great goal from Kroos. And then, we score again, and then we just sit back, we just sit back, and then it's like, why are we doing that? During the second half, we let them pretty much get back into the game completely. So, once again, and the other thing about that game, about the Rayo Vallecano game, was, the fact that this was the first, this was the first time I think in a while that I've seen Benzema miss so many shots. Some really, and not miss shots pretty much of a high percentage that he usually scores. If you look at once again, looking at the expected goals were 2.32. So we essentially had more chances to score goals than we actually got. And part of that is, of course, the fact that it was part of that, of course, is that that Benzema missed those shots. So we could have had more goals, but it was kind of pretty similar to what the game should have been. I mean, 2-1, we did well. So, and one of the things that I saw right now, from the Real Champs that they posted, was that Real Madrid is outperforming its expected goal by 8.8 goals so far in league play this season. This is a tweet from the Real Champs. That's more than any other team in Europe's top 5 at the moment, top 5 leagues, of course. Is that great finishing or lucky? Benzema and Vinicius would argue the former. Statisticians might say otherwise. Listen, with stats, it's so crazy because you have what is this? You have goal. You have the expected goals, and now you have expected goals on target. So essentially, a shot might be, somebody would have to come in and, tell me a little bit more about this and sit down and explain it to me, because I've looked at it and I understand it, but it just seems, so you expected goals on target is kind of reanalyzing, I guess the how would I say, the probability of that ball going in or becoming a goal after the fact. So it could be that essentially, the shot had maybe a chance of, 20% to go in. It was one of those, shots with very little chance of going in. But with the way the player shot it, after, the goal is scored, they reanalyze it. And with the way the the way the player shot it and the way he placed it and where he placed it within the goal essentially made it go up into a higher, essentially a higher expected goal number. And that was why, and that is kind of analyzed after the fact. So it could be essentially, that's why I'm saying there's so much kind of gray area there, because in this case, what they're saying, what the Real Champs is saying is, they've been lucky, or they have just been better finishing from Vinicius and Benzema. And obviously we've seen better finishing from the likes of Vinicius and Benzema, and there's been chances for them, the chances, and even sometimes the goals that they've scored have been definitely against, sort of with an XG percentage of very, very low XG percentage, but they're scoring them. Like the Toni Kroos goal, I think, was like 0.3, essentially was 0.03. So it was like only 3% of those type of shots go in. But of where he placed it, those shots from the position he was in on the field and, how he hit the ball, the way it was coming and all that kind of stuff, where the way he hit it, it was basically 3% of those go in. However, his placement, where he placed it in the goal, essentially boosted it up to like an XGOT, or an X goals on target percentage of like 40%. So essentially, reanalyzing it after the fact, even though it was a low percentage shot, it was likely to go in because of the way Toni Kroos struck it. That's what I'm getting from that stats. So, yeah, in this way, they are kind of out. And that helps in this argument that they are essentially outperforming their expected goals because of the fact that they are, even though they are getting these maybe low percentage shots, they are finishing these low percentage shots and scoring. And that's a good thing. That just shows, I think, that there has been an improvement in finishing. And we are seeing that because we were struggling to score so much last season. So much last season we were struggling to score. In this season, we have essentially a duo of Karim Benzema and Vinicius Jr. that are one of the two most dangerous duos, of course, in Europe. So I definitely think it doesn't have anything to do, in this case, the statisticians might say otherwise, but there are always exceptions to the rule. And in this case, I think we're seeing an improvement in the finishing of our team. The problem is, of course, we're not always putting away the chances that we should be putting in, but we are the chances that we're creating, we're not putting them in. But then the funny thing is we outpace this expected goals number because we essentially do put away the chances that are more difficult. So if you look at it that way, it's kind of, strange how that's working out. So I think for my last point here is, the attitude, once again, I want to revisit that. The attitude under Ancelotti, of course, talking about what I'm seeing, of course, with this team, the attitude under Ancelotti, I've used that word a lot. It's a more, I think, like I said, it's a more safe approach, I guess. They go up and score and then they kind of relax a bit. They don't chase the game as hard. They're not as aggressive. Whereas I felt that under Zidane, and I don't know if it was Zidane because of who Zidane is, of him being such a phenomenal player and players respecting him so much that if Zidane says, listen, I need you guys to go out and treat this game as a final, which we all know that became one of his favorite phrases, that every single game was a final. It really seemed that the team played like that every single game. When they went down on the scorecard, they were always playing like that. And they always played with that fire. Win or lose, they were playing like that. This team, unfortunately, seems to me at least a little bit more lackadaisical in the way that they are going about playing the game. It seems they score goals and then they sit back. they relax. They let the team get into it. And then once they let the team get into it and then the other team scores, then they're like, oh shit, let's close up shop. Let's make sure we plug the holes so that we don't get any more goals. And then they just sit there. It's almost like, I don't want to say it's a catenaccio style because of Ancelotti being, Italian, but it's almost in a way, score the goals and then sit back, become very defensive, and, we're not going to try to continue to run up the scoreline. And not that they don't try, they do try, but there's a lot less intensity than I remember seeing on the Sociedad. Now, that could be my perception of just the things I'm remembering, but I just remember that this whole idea of La Flor de Zidane was always very important in the media, which was the fact that Zidane was always lucky. La Flor being, he was lucky to score. He was always finding goals or finding wins when they were playing terrible or when they shouldn't have won. In the last minute, they would fight back and do it. And there was even a point where Cristóbal Soria, who is a total hater of Real Madrid, on El Chiringuito, was saying that he felt like Real Madrid had something in them, that they were a team that just would never give up, and they would continue on and continue on and continue on. And we crawled and we clawed our way last season into the semifinals of the Champions League and until essentially pretty much where the La Liga came down to the last game really of the season. And that was all with a team that was completely destroyed by injuries, with players sidelined by COVID, with Zidane sidelined by COVID. There was a lot of other issues going on. And it makes me wonder if Ancelotti doesn't instill the same fire or the same hunger in the players. But I think what happens is, I think Zidane was a much more a player. It seems to me he was a coach that was able to manage his guys and inspire his guys in the dressing room a lot more, possibly because of who he is, and let's be real, who he is as a player, who he was as a player, who he was as a manager as well, with the three-peat in the UCL. And that's not something that Ancelotti is. Ancelotti is the same. He's very good at managing the players. He's I think he takes all of them under his wing, and he's a caring and good coach, so much so that we remember that many players loved Ancelotti, and when he left, they were very, very thankful of him. When he left, they were very happy with him. And Madridistas at that time, even the media, who didn't understand why they were letting him go, even though, yes, we had a bad season, but essentially he was the author of the Décima. So it was an important, it was kind of seen as a kind of a nostalgic guy that we should have, did we need to get rid of him so quickly? And then after him, of course, there was a hodgepodge of other people that came in that did not do well. And then we got Zidane, and then the rest is history. So these two guys have a very different management style. I definitely think Ancelotti is a lot more tactical, but he's very stubborn. I think definitely we're seeing this thing, because I asked myself, are the players tired? He's asking, because he said a lot, that it's that is difficult, the season, playing games midweek and then play games on the weekend, and then the travel, of course, with the Champions League. So are the players tired, as he's saying? But then the thing that strikes me as strange in that argument is, if you're saying that, then why are you waiting so long to make substitutions? In the case of the Rayo game, he waited until the 83rd minute to make a substitution. Bringing on, what was it? He brought on Lucas Vázquez, and then he brought on, who else did he bring on? It wasn't Camavinga. I forgot who he brought on. Who did he bring on? You guys are probably yelling at the radio, whatever, yelling out loud or whatever. But I forgot who he brought on. But he basically brings them in at the end of the game when it's like 83rd minute. Like, what else are they going to do? Oh, he brought in Hazard. Did he bring in Hazard? No, he didn't bring in Hazard, did he? No, he brought in Hazard. Yeah. So, in Hazard playing as a center forward. So, it was a very strange decision by Ancelotti to me to do that. Essentially, if you're saying, the players are tired and they're burnt out or whatever, they need a break. And they're not going to get a break. Some of these guys are not going to get a break. I think we have like 12 players, I counted, that are going to international duty. Alaba, Bale, Militao, Vinicius, Casemiro, who definitely needs some sort of relaxation or break. I think I already said like Benzema and all these guys, but there's like 12 guys, okay? Carvajal got called up by Luis Enrique, a Real Madrid player. Oh, my God. So why would he wait? Why would he not rotate if he knows that these guys are going to be also having trouble with their team, are going to be having minutes with their teams? I don't know. Like I said, Zidane seemed to have an ability to squeeze everything he could out of the players, even when there were multiple injuries and COVID. And I feel like Ancelotti just seems to content to coast in the games. And is this, and one of the things I wrote here was, is the coasting at the end of the game by design, or is it because the players are fatigued and that's what's kicking in? But then if it is the players that are fatigued and that's kicking in, why are you waiting until the 83rd minute to sub players? So that's the strange thing to me. And then the other thing I had questions are, does he have the same effect on the players as Zidane? Does he have that ability to motivate? Does he have that magic that Zidane has? I mean, I'm saying this as a huge Zidane fan. I just can't imagine being a player at Real Madrid and having Zidane coaching me. Having somebody that I probably looked up to because I looked up to him. Having a guy that you looked up to basically as your coach. I mean, there's got to be something where you want to go out there and play your heart out for him, And with some of these guys that, yes, were players like Ancelotti, who was a talented player as well. The one thing that is, these guys are many of the players are very removed from the era where Ancelotti played. They are not as far removed from the era where Zidane played. So a lot of them obviously looked up to Zidane, to Sisu, when they were younger. So this is very interesting in that regard, is maybe that effect of that connection. Not that he doesn't have connection with the players, but that extra, like, oh my God, I want to go out there and essentially look amazing for my idol. That is where I think there might be a little bit of change there, but it's not that it's a bad thing. I think both are great coaches. Both deserve respect. Both have their flaws. I mean, we could say that the flaws with Zidane was a lot of times it seemed like he just coached sort of whatever was on the field. He would play. He would just come up with it. It wasn't always what I felt was tactically sound. I remember people asking you, like, what formation are we playing in today? Like, what are they doing? Why is this guy here? Whereas I feel like Ancelotti is a lot more sure about how the formation he's playing in, and the players are occupying those spaces and they are playing in those positions, and they do not move away too much from that. And like some people have mentioned, is this cowardice? Is this playing it safe? Is this he doesn't want to go and risk take. He would rather win very conservatively in that sense, or play very conservatively, to the chagrin of many Madridistas, because of course we want to see goals. We want to see our guys playing. I definitely think that there is a lot more, and it's the same thing that I felt last season. I felt like if we had everybody healthy last season, I think this is what we would see. We would see the performances like we're the ones we're seeing. I don't know if I would say better under Zidane. Because people are saying, oh, it's essentially the same team, but it's not really, because There's a lot of a lot of people were hurt, were struggling, were tired towards the end of the season. They were completely fatigued. There was no rotation. Now we have that, and then we did not have a Vinicius that was playing the way he's playing now. I think Benzema I think he's kicked it up a notch this season, even more from last season. Now we have Rodrigo, who's back and is playing well. Fede Valverde was injured quite a bit last season, and now, unfortunately, he's injured again. Carvajal, you name it. And then, of course, we lost two big players in Sergio Ramos and in Varane. But these Nacho and Militao stepped up. Now we have Militao and Alaba. Mendy is back. So it's essentially the same team, but it's also they look a lot fresher and are playing, I think, a lot better now than they were last season. Towards the end of the season, we were grinding out wins, but it just got to a point where it was not sustainable anymore. I think there's more of a chance that we can continue the way we're doing now. And if maybe that could be what Ancelotti saw from last season was, I need to conserve these guys. But then then I trip over my own words, because then it just doesn't make sense to me that you would wait into the 83rd minute to make a change. Because it can't be that you're waiting in the 83rd minute to make a change simply because if it would make sense if you were saying, okay, I'm going to wait to change because the guys that I have on the field aren't going to be called up by their national teams. But most of the guys were, so, they need a break too, so it just made it strange to me that he waited that long, it just, that is what I don't get. And that is kind of what I'm starting to see some stubbornness, which is the same stubbornness that Zidane had, of course. Some stubbornness, definitely. Some bad decision making in the sense of making the subs, which is kind of a repeat of the same thing that happened under Zidane too. Zidane was sometimes taking his sweet time to get the subs on the field. So if we really look at it, these guys are very similar in some regards. I think both guys, once again, they need to be respected. Both have their flaws, both have their strengths. And Madridistas pitting players and or coaches against each other, I think, is idiotic. And I see that, of course, in Twitter and in all sorts of, football Twitter. Are you part of Zidane FC? Are you part of Ancelotti FC? Dude, bro, get a life, man. We're all in this together as the COVID pandemic got into our heads. We're all in this together. We're on the same team. Zidane was a great coach. He was essentially assistant coach under Ancelotti. Ancelotti is a great coach, and let's give them the respect they both deserve. The Casemiro criticism, I wanted to touch on that real quick. I think the guy's tired, man. I think he looks tired. I think he looks winded. I think he doesn't look good, and I think it's interesting. I think, I definitely think he doesn't look, he's not playing as well as he should. He makes sometimes some really strange decisions. Passes are not accurate. I don't know why, but Casemiro's the guy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he's the guy that I've seen try the back heel pass the most of this season, and most of the times it doesn't come off, where I think something more simple would do. So it's strange to me. That there is strange. I just don't know what it is, but I definitely think he's tired, and he has it's been season after season after season of us not having a guy that can take up that position. And I feel like Antonio Blanco could possibly be somebody you could put in that position as a CDM. I don't know if, I don't know if he's more of a, but I think I think for Castilla, he did play in that role. So essentially, why are we not trying him more at least he gives Casemiro a breather occasionally, I know Camavinga isn't of the same. Obviously, he's only 18, and maybe they're grooming him to take up that spot. But who knows? I don't know. I don't know. But I think what it is Casemiro is at this point. I think he's overworked. He could be saturated, and I think it's only natural because he has been very much a shell of his former self. But I don't think it's time for him to go. I don't think anything like that. I think what he needs to do is the man needs rest. I think what happens is the man needs rotation. The man needs somebody fighting for his position, competition for that position in order for him to kind of get back into the groove of things again. So that's my opinion. I think he's been an incredibly solid player. He's prone to mistakes here and there, but he more often than not does play extremely well for us. And it's just one of those dips in form that is going to be only natural. The point is, rather than say when a player has a dip in form, rather than say, listen, we got to get rid of him because he sucks or whatever, and then hand off somebody like that to your opponents or to essentially a rival is idiotic. Because to me, what it is if a guy has a dip in form, the first thing you should try to do before selling him and saying, all hope is lost is try to recover him and figure out what is going on in that situation. And at this point, I don't think the guy is beyond, being salvaged. I mean, he hasn't been that bad. He's been bad, but he hasn't been so much so that I would say get rid of him now. What he needs is, like I say, he needs to take a step back, get benched a little bit, put somebody else in that position, which is why it's a difficult thing because we haven't had an opportunity or anyone to really put in that position. And now we're stuck where he's going to be getting more, he gets so many minutes, plays so many games, and we essentially grind down this player to the bone. And that's not positive at all. All right. With that said, guys, I think the last thing I wanted to comment on, of course, is, the state of La Liga. I think it's like one of the things I said at the beginning, I think it's Real Madrid's chance to win this La Liga. I think it's all going to depend on if Real Sociedad can keep up what they're doing, which, I think is interesting. Of course, I'd like to see another team that isn't, Barcelona, Atletico. I'd like to see another team fighting for the spot. I do think we can hang with them. I do think we can hang with a lot of the big boys in La Liga. It's all about the Champions League this year. Can we hang with big boys there? That is going to be very difficult. And then, that's kind of where I'm at in that regard. Atletico dropped points. This weekend had some insane games. 3-1, Atletico was winning, and then they get they basically choke and give up They give up 2 points and lose 2 points. Give up the draw, get the draw, allow Valencia to get the draw. And Barcelona does the same thing. La era de Xavi starts at Barcelona. They were 3 up on the scorecard against Celta Vigo away from home. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. They fall apart completely. And Celta Vigo and Iago Aspas, who wasn't even playing that good as of late and had needed for the coach to tell the crowd to clap for him, and I think it was in the 10th minute of the game, in order to show their love for him and try to push him, I guess, get his morale up. It worked in the end because he scored a brace that essentially and he scored the final goal in essentially the last minute of extra time to tie the game, and Barcelona drops all the way to 9th place. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. People are like, oh, I think somebody on Twitter was like, oh, I'm sad because, we don't have any competition anymore, blah, 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 blah. We do have competition. It's just not Barcelona anymore, and it's fine with me. I'm happy with it. as them being our diehard, our total rivals, our bitter rivals, I'm glad to see them suffering. I'm glad to see them suffering. I'm glad to see the likes of Jota Jordi and Cristóbal Soria from El Chiringuito crying about it. I am happy to see them so pissed off about this drop in form. So and then bringing in Xavi, there's this there's this comment that Madridistas are afraid of Xavi. I wouldn't say afraid. We respect him because we know he's a good player, and we respect him because we know he can bring some. Maybe it's the fact that no, it's not even that. It's, for me, what bothers me is that they're so happy that they have some sort of that they have ilusión, that they have this feeling of things are going to turn around, and I kind of wanted them the hole to be a little deeper, to them to suffer a little more before finding this way out of the hole. Maybe I'm being a little mean there, but it comes with the territory, of being a Madrid fan. You dislike Barcelona, and I don't dislike Barcelona every player. I'm actually bummed out that Ansu Fati is hurt. I think Dembélé is a guy that I was following when he was at Borussia Dortmund. I thought he was a great player. I was worried when he went to Barcelona, and he just hasn't been able to catch a break, the guy. Ansu Fati, same thing, man. I mean, those guys, I think, are the future there, that they can have some potential solid players there, but it's going to be really interesting to see what Xavi, because the thing is, here's my last thought on this whole thing. For me, they are looking for another Pep Guardiola. They've already said this, and it's not even for me they are looking for it, or I think. That's what they're doing. They're looking for another Pep. They're essentially looking for another Pep Guardiola, and that is not easy. They are looking for lightning to strike twice, because Pep Guardiola was, in a lot of ways, sometimes things happen. People want to repeat eras, but you can't repeat them. And I think sometimes it's like, it's like saying this guy is the new Messi or the new Cristiano or the new Maradona. You can't really say any of that, because those guys, it's a disservice to the player who has a name and he wants to make a name for himself. He isn't the new Lionel Messi. He isn't the new Cristiano Ronaldo, because those two guys have already etched their names in history. Those two guys already are those guys. They are the Cristiano Ronaldo. They are the Lionel Messi. They are the Maradona. They are the Pelé. They are the Johan Cruyff. They are the Zinedine Zidans. You can't be the new those guys, And the same thing goes for coaches. You cannot be a new Pep, because Pep was a confluence of a lot of positive things at the right moment for Barcelona. I pulled up this thing where I was looking at when Pep Guardiola took over Barcelona. Just look at the names of the players that he had at that moment already on his team. Lionel Messi, of course. Lionel Messi, a young Lionel Messi, of course. Thierry Henry. Samuel Eto'o in his last season. Andrés Iniesta. Of course we know who that is. Xavi Hernandez, of course, who is now going to be the coach. Sergio Busquets. Gerard Piqué. Yaya Touré. Carlos Puyol. A young Pedro was coming up as well. So you had those players. And then in the next season, this is the famous season where he got the sextete, right? With the 6 trophies. That was when he had just come up from Barcelona B to Barcelona and was essentially coaching a team that was full of stars at that point. They were full of stars at that point. He let go of Ronaldinho. He let go of Deco. And he brought in, who was it that he brought in? He brought in Seydou Keita. So he brought in these guys. And then he brought in Dani Alves, and he brought in guys that essentially became that core that we saw that was, essentially a unstoppable force in European football for some time. So that's what Pep Guardiola essentially inherited. And he also inherited money to get players like Dani Alves from Sevilla. This that Xavi is inheriting is nowhere near the same thing. Who does he have there that is up to par with any of the players that I just mentioned? He has Gerard Piqué. He has Sergio Busquets. But those guys are well far away from the players that they used to be, right? He doesn't have himself. He can't go out there and play. Iniesta's no longer there anymore. Messi's no longer there anymore. Thierry Henry and Samuel Eto'o are long gone. You know, the likes of Dani Alves are long gone. Neymar ain't coming back. Luis Suarez isn't coming back. You know, so what do you have? What do you have? You have a talent like Ansu Fati, who's injured right now. A talent like Dembele, who's also injured right now. Guys like, who I think, I actually like him, Ronald Araujo. Pedri, who definitely is, I would say, a solid player. Remains to be seen what happens after they've completely played him so much last season and, with the Spanish national team, how he's going to recover from everything. You have young prospects that we still remains to be seen. I mean, obviously there's a lot of guys that are looking towards them as being these new, these new wonder kids like Gavi and Nico. And you have guys like Eddie Garcia, and I don't see the Eddie Garcias. I don't see Dest. I don't see Memphis. Memphis Depay, I like Memphis Depay, but he's alone up there, and I don't see anyone else that's going to feed him anything else, feed him to get to score, so, and he's not even a number 9. So we have to see what's going to happen. And I don't think Xavi's going to be the one that's going to save them. So am I concerned as a Madridista? Not really. If you look at like the things I'm talking about, I looked at the players compared to what Xavi is inheriting now as compared to Pep. There's no way. Number one, he isn't Pep. That's the first thing that's going to be a problem. He isn't Pep Guardiola. That's the first thing on the list. He isn't Pep. And then second of all, Pep Guardiola didn't inherit a team that was in shambles. Like, this team is in shambles. Maybe they weren't doing as well, but under Frank Rijkaard, but, they weren't in shambles. And he is inheriting a team that is in shambles. And third of all, they had money to spend. They had players to sell and money to spend, and he doesn't have that. They have players to sell, but some of the players that they have to sell, with the likes of what I heard today from Chiringuito, Braithwaite, the likes of Braithwaite, Luke de Jong, I think some of these guys are the ones that they're interested in getting rid of. Maybe Dest. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Dest was on that list, but those guys, you're not going to get a lot of money for those guys to be able to get another world-class player, to get a world-class player, to potentially get a Haaland or Mbappe. I don't know who else, that you want to talk about, that you can put up there. You're not going to get those guys. So anyway, that is my podcast for today, guys. That is my podcast for, that is the podcast for this week. I'm going to do one on international football, or just kind of talk about everything sort of in a way, instead of the 4 games that I missed. I want to definitely bring somebody on the podcast, do a little bit of a recap of where we are currently in the season. I have an idea of who I want to bring on. I have a couple of different ideas of who I want to bring on, either Trambach or Jota, or maybe somebody different. So I'm going to definitely have somebody on next weekend, and that'll be sort of during the international break. For me, CONMEBOL, the only team, like I said, the only one that I'm really interested in watching is Colombia playing. I kind of catch some of the international, the European games, but it's different, guys. It's different. As my good friends at the Madridista Roundabout podcast talk about, it's just the time where you relax and sit back and just kind of like, you watch games, but you're not as emotionally invested in them. So with that said, guys, thank you again for joining me here on the Nada Mas podcast. I am your host, Eric Rivera. And remember, guys, there on the ticker, on the video, you can see Nada Mas Podcast on Twitter, Nada Mas Podcast on Facebook, YNM Podcast on Instagram. You can always go to our website for articles by my good friend, Trambak B, as we call him here. He's our senior contributor for Nada Mas Podcast. Check those out at nadamas.net. You can also catch, of course, not only the articles, but of course, if you don't, however you're listening to this podcast, but you can listen to it there as well. So that's really what we got going over there right now. Once again, leave a comment, leave a rating if you are listening on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe if you are listening or watching, like I would say. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and hit that notification button and help us grow our YouTube page. Thank you once again for joining me, guys. I really appreciate it. A la Madrid, a la Madrid, a la Madrid. I think it's going to be a great, after we come back from this parón de selecciones, this international break, we are going to return just as strong. And I have a feeling, like I said, Real Madrid, it's really Real Madrid for me. It's Real Madrid's Liga to lose. What else happens, like in Europe and Copa del Rey? Well, Copa del Rey, I think we have a chance as well. But whatever happens in Europe, it remains to be seen, guys. Do we have enough to contend with the big dogs? What's going to happen in the winter transfer window? We'll see. We'll see, guys. A lot of stuff coming up. It's an exciting season. Sometimes these crazy seasons like this, since Cristiano left and we're not just beating the crap out of teams left and right, this is a good thing. This is definitely a good thing. So, it gives us more to talk about. Gives us a lot more to talk about. So it's exciting. So thank you once again, guys. And that's it. A la Madrid. Talk to you guys again soon. Thank you very much.